Jerusalem, the news with Martin Lewis.
Outrage at the holiest place of the Jews. The rebel rabbi stands accused of criminal damage in the temple precincts. Jewish leaders are shocked by direct action taken by the self-styled purifier of the faith. In other headlines, how will the chief priest deal with this threat to law and order at Passover? In Galilee, the ground may be stony, but the rabbi's words of justice, freedom, and equality have already taken root.
And as the markets hum with preparations for Passover, what this festival means for the Jews of the empire, and why in Jerusalem they're worried that Jesus is going to wreck it.
Good evening and welcome to our special newsroom set up to monitor events in Palestine. We have cameras at key points across Jerusalem and reporters standing by with the news as it breaks. As we heard yesterday, a shadow has fallen over the Jewish celebration of Passover as radical dissidents attempt to disrupt the festival. The main news of the day, the leader of a group of agitators from Nazareth has run amok in the temple precincts. For the latest on that, we go over live now to Richard Lindley. Richard.
Well, as we predicted last night, the storm that's been threatening this tense Passover has broken. And it's broken just where we thought it would, here at the temple. Last night, the leader of the Nazareth sect secretly visited the temple precincts on what is now apparent was a reconnaissance mission for today's outrage. Although the Jewish authorities were expecting some sort of demonstration, most people who'd come to the temple for morning prayer were totally unprepared for the arrival of the group from Galilee. And although security had been stepped up, no special precautions had been taken here at the temple's money-changing center, where the rabbi, according to those who witnessed the incident, seems to have run amok.
It's a house of worship, and it became nothing more than a selling place, and he called it a den of thieves. They were selling the sheep for sacrifice and doing all kinds of things that the Lord found offensive because they were not observing it as a holy place.
The big question now is, how will the authorities react? For the Jewish hierarchy, Jesus' action hits not just their pockets, it strikes at the very heart of their authority.
I think the high priesthood has seen this type of thing before. I think typically by the high priests are of an older generation. They know that this world isn't the world where things are all that ideal. They certainly know, because they're on the inside, that the world of the temple in Jerusalem isn't a totally spiritual and ideal world. They are very well aware of the Roman demands from them and the Roman expectations from them, and one of the last things they need are these Galilean hotheads coming in and thinking that they can take over the show.
As for the Roman authorities, they know exactly what's been going on. They have troops, of course, in the garrison next to the temple, and already word will have reached their commanders and ultimately Governor Pilate, who's due here in the city at any moment. So far, Jesus has avoided arrest, but already people are saying that by his actions today, the rebel rabbi may well have signed his own death warrant. This is Richard Lindley in Jerusalem.
There's speculation that the rabbi's actions may be the result of the so-called Jerusalem syndrome, a psychological condition affecting some visitors to the Holy City, which makes them believe they have some sort of divine destiny. Another possible reason for the rabbi's extraordinary behavior is the comparatively simple and unsophisticated background of the man and his followers. Nearly all of them come from the northern area of Galilee, and most are poorly educated. Although he's thought to have visited Jerusalem on 2 previous occasions, the rabbi is clearly having trouble adapting to the pace of life in one of the empire's biggest and most cosmopolitan cities. With the background, here's Linda Bryans.
However tranquil and idyllic it looks, don't be fooled. The people who live here are on the very edge of survival, the very brink of mutiny. This has always been subsistence farming. Anything the farmers grow goes to local landlords or their agents. But now, even the little amount they've been allowed to keep for themselves is being taken away in tax or tribute to Rome's local client king, Herod Antipas. Roman landlords are also exploiting an old Jewish tenancy law, which meant that privately owned farmland reverts to public ownership after 50 years. Thanks very much, say the agents of King Herod. That means it reverts to us. The city of Sepphoris and the rebuilt city of Tiberias provide work, but they're also drawing people away from the land. Perhaps because of the sturdy, self-reliant attitude that comes from making a living from the sea, the province they call Go-It-Alone Galilee has always had a tradition of independence. The authorities who have to police this historically mutinous province face local resentments about the puppet king Rome has drafted in to rule them. In the caves of Mount Arbel, an armed Galilean militia once held out for weeks against an entire Roman legion. Galilee has always been a hotbed of sedition and armed banditry. Nearly 25 years ago, a man known as Judas the Galilean led a rebellion. The revolt was crushed and he was executed. Today, one of the elite 12-man inner circle of the Jesus movement, whose identity we've disguised, explains the movement's appeal. He's the organization's treasurer, and by coincidence, his first name is Judas too.
He may appear like a gentle teacher riding on a humble donkey, but I tell you this, his kingdom is more powerful than the power of the Jewish leaders and the empire put together.
We were taken to a mountain beside the Sea of Galilee, where the insider said Jesus spelled out for the first time his manifesto for the so-called New Kingdom.
He said the poor would be blessed and that the meek would inherit the earth. He said the mighty would be cast down. For the people who heard him, it was devastating stuff.
The rabbi may be able to get away with that sort of wild talk here in the relative calm of Galilee. But now that he's taken it to Jerusalem and the real world of Rome and the Jewish authorities, it'll be an altogether different matter, and a more dangerous one. This is Linda Bryans in Galilee.
You're watching Dateline Jerusalem on a day when vandalism in the temple precincts has cast a gloom over preparations for the Passover festivities. Coming up later in the program, Caiaphas and the crisis. The Jews and Governor Pilate look to the chief priest to act against the dissidents. And why the food sold in the markets of Jerusalem has so much significance this Passover. The man immediately responsible for dealing with the emergency caused by today's action in the temple is the chief priest, Joseph Caiaphas. Caiaphas, like all chief priests, was appointed by the Romans. He's had the job for 18 years, suggesting a close working relationship with Governor Pilate. But he's seen as a quisling by more militant sections of the Jewish community. The chief priest mediates between the people and the governor. He plays a key role in maintaining law and order. He and his council, the Sanhedrin, do have the power to arrest, try and punish offenders, but capital punishment remains the prerogative of Rome. And we can go over now live to the chief priest's palace in Jerusalem and his spokesman, Michael Cole. Mr. Cole, how is the chief priest likely to deal with this?
Well, Martin, Caiaphas has had to deal with difficult situations like this for the last 18 years. You know, it's easy and it's fashionable for people to come into Jerusalem and complain about what they call fat cats at the temple. But Caiaphas and other members of the Supreme Council, the Sanhedrin, they do an extremely difficult job in very, very taxing circumstances.
I think you'll admit they are extremely privileged.
Well, privileged, yes, and they get their rewards, but these are rewards which go with responsibility. What we're talking about here is a very delicate balancing act. Pilate could, if he was so minded, close down Passover tomorrow. What would happen then? That would be disastrous. It would be something we don't want to see. It would cast a gloom over everybody's holiday. The last thing we want is troops out there on the streets.
So he's likely to play it down?
Well, you shouldn't think that Caiaphas is a soft touch, not at all. You don't get to be chief priest without being pretty rigorous in terms of matters of justice. He will be, as he's always been, firm but fair. But as the chief priest himself has often said, he's got to bear in mind the welfare of all the Jews. Far better that one troublemaker be made an example of than all the Jews be made to suffer.
Mr. Cole, thank you. The crisis takes place against the background of Passover, one of three major Jewish pilgrim festivals. Passover, as we heard in last night's report, is a tense time politically in Jerusalem, but it's also very much a private celebration for those involved. As the public crisis mounts, David Jessel looks at the meaning of Passover for the pilgrims flocking to the Holy City.
In Jerusalem's bustling market, you've got all the ingredients for a successful Passover. First, bread. But it must be unleavened bread, because the Jewish people had no time to wait for it to rise before escaping from slavery in Egypt. Next, lamb. The Jews smeared their doorposts with lamb's blood, so the angel of death would know which houses to spare, as it took revenge on the firstborn of their Egyptian slave masters. Bitter herbs are meant to remind the Jews of the bitterness of their Egyptian bondage. Moses gave strict instructions that the meaning behind the menu should be explained to every new generation of Jews, which makes Passover a particularly special occasion for the family.
It's also the beginning of springtime when the weather gets turning nicer and everybody sort of renews things, and so there's a large national come-together in the temple. That's what pilgrimage is all about.
All over Jerusalem, families will be praying for a happy and a peaceful Passover, the very thing the rabbi from Nazareth and his followers seem determined to ruin. Some people say you should keep politics out of religion, but at a celebration like this, with the politics of freedom at its very heart, and for a people currently fretting under Roman rule, that's easier said than done. This is David Jessel at Jerusalem's Central Market.
And for the latest political developments, we can now go over live to David Jessel, who is at the meeting of the Jewish Supreme Council, the Sanhedrin, just inside the walls of the city. David, any more outrages planned for tomorrow?
Well, I don't know if you'd call it an outrage, but the news is that Jesus now plans to debate openly with the authorities tomorrow. Now, this may be an attempt on his part to row back from the more direct and confrontational action involved in this morning's temple outrage, but I have to say that the word from behind the closed doors of the Sanhedrin is that the authorities are furious with the Galileans' action, and they've already decided to take steps to neutralize this threat to their authority.
David, thanks very much. Just time for a quick look at tomorrow's papers. The Jerusalem Post has outrage, a predictable headline there, and Haaretz goes for fat cats had it coming, which clearly won't go down too well in the Caiaphas camp. That's it from us. Till tomorrow from Dateline Jerusalem. Good night.